So Alexander is now going to use the clicker.
Yep. Does everyone hear me? Okay, good. Hello, everybody, and thanks for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. First off, I want to say I have recently been appointed as the DIO of the Icelandic FA, but just days prior to being here, so I have zero experience of the job. So, yeah. I also have a bachelor's degree in leisure studies from the University of Iceland. I graduated in 2017, and I wrote my final project along with Ólafur Þór Davíðsson about fans' access to our tiny football stadiums in Iceland. Ólafur Þór is not here today, but he will have his small input later in this presentation. Yep. So, who am I? On the slide, there are 3 pictures. Me doing a presentation on this subject, me playing football at the age of 6 or 7, and finally, me and a good friend at the National Stadium. One of us being a bit more occupied on doing selfies than watching the game. So, the lack of accessibility at football stadiums in Iceland has irritated me for a long time. I feel that I cannot be the supporter I want to be because of bad accessibility. Some years ago, I talked to the then General Secretary of KSÍ, which is the Icelandic FA, wanting to discuss accessibility. But I came to closed doors. He was not interested and did not see the needs of improving the accessibility for fans. According to him, the reason was that few disabled people attended matches, and as regulations at the time did not say that things needed to improve, there was no need of improvement. When I started at the university in 2014, I had the support of my studies and teachers, and new opportunities opened. So in the summer of 2016, I booked a meeting with Klara Bjartmars, now General Secretary of KSÍ, and presented my idea of starting to work on accessibility. I told her how much I was into football, but did not see the point in going to most of the stadiums, as I did not feel welcome there because of bad accessibility. If this was the case for me, I knew this was probably the case for other people too. Klara's reaction was amazing. She said, "What do we need to do?" This was not the response I expected because of past experiences. After that, I was lucky enough to do my field studies with KSÍ and work on accessibility while I was there. This work then turned into my BA thesis, which was no easy task, so a fellow leisure student, Ólafur Þór, joined me in the project. In the first days of the field study, we had a meeting with Klara Bjartmars, and it was decided that we would do assessments on all the stadium in the top tier Pepsi League, Pepsi for sponsorship reasons. That meant 15 clubs total. It was not an option to only cover stadiums of the men's league. For us, women are equally important part of the game in every way, access to women's matches included. To do the assessments, we made a checklist with the things we wanted to see during our stadium visits. The UEFA CAFE Good Practice Guide was used in the making of the checklist. We also consulted local regulations, the Icelandic Building Regulation and the Federation Regulation. We knew that asking questions about the accessibility was not going to be enough. We had to see things for ourselves to get the best results. So visits to the stadium were necessary. KC provided us contacts for the clubs, so we could request a visit to do the assessments. All the clubs welcomed us. The first visit was in the end of January and the last in the first week of February of 2017. We had good access and assistance from KC staff members at the office during this time. They provided a car for the shorter trips and flights were booked and paid for longer trips. We felt welcome like any other employee of KC. The thesis was turned into the university in September of 2017, and the final report was handed to KC in October of the same year. On the slide, you can see a picture of Oliver Thor's arm on a plane to do our visit in Akureyri. This is his input today, and he probably says hi to you all. Okay. On the slide, there's a map of Iceland. Locations of the 15 stadiums are marked with red squares. Most of the stadiums were in Reykjavik and the surrounding towns. The other stadiums were in Grindavík, southwest of Reykjavik, 2 stadiums in Akureyri in the north, Vestmannaeyjar Island, south of Iceland, and finally Akranes and Ólafsvík in the west part of Iceland. I want to mention that these assessments were mainly, but not exclusively, done with wheelchair users in mind. We looked at everything that the common fan can experience during the game, such as car parking, ticket sales, sidelines, accessible seating and companion seating. Could every fan, home and away, sit together? Where do fans gather around during halftime, and access to toilets and food? Our main findings were that all the stadiums needed improvements on wheelchair space, signs and markings. Of the 15 stadiums, 5 stands were completely inaccessible to wheelchair users, although there was a possibility to sit next to, above or beneath the stands, in some cases far from fellow fans. Sometimes fans could not sit with their people, and only some clubs offered seats for companions, which then were cheap plastic chairs. 10 stadiums needed improvements on sidelines. In most cases, the seating row in front of the unmarked wheelchair spaces were too close, so when someone stands up in front of you, the sideline is compromised. Access to information was also a big problem. We had to point out to every club that information on existing accessibility needed to be available, for example, on the club websites. Another big finding was to see how important it is that the regulations talk about accessibility. It did not take much reading of the regulations to find out that football and disability is not a big topic. Things listed in the Icelandic building regulation were sufficient, such as car parking spaces and toilets. The building regulation, however, does not talk about outdoor sporting venues, and the federation regulation talks very little about disability. If we are ever going to see more accessible stadiums, regulations must be improved. I will now give you 2 examples of stadiums. The stadium of Víkingur in Ólafsvík. On the slide, there's a picture of that stadium. The clubhouse, located behind the stand, is rather new, so all facilities in there are good and according to the newest building regulation. However, the stand itself has its problems. There could be good access for wheelchair users directly behind the stand, but there are small concrete walls that block that view almost completely for many. Currently, a solution for wheelchair users would be to sit on the balcony of the clubhouse, where the sightline is good, but that ultimately means that they cannot sit with their own fans. Next example is my home stadium of Fjölnir, which is in Reykjavik. On the slide, there are two pictures, one of the stand and the other of the clubhouse. As with the case of Víkingur, the clubhouse has good facilities because of the building regulation. Behind the stand, there's a lot of unmarked space which could be used for wheelchair spaces, but is not marked as such. The downside is that the sightline is compromised if people stand up in front of you. And people can't stand right next to you, resulting in the view being blocked. I often choose to be next to the clubhouse, but the problems there are similar. And yes, I have told them what they need to do to improve the accessibility. But what did the academic part of this project add to the practical part? For example, I learned about planning, training, and supervising events and volunteers through leisure studies, all which deepened my grasp of cafes and UEFA's handbooks and regulations. Importance of belonging to a group of fans and how they work has given me a chance to understanding group dynamics and better justify the importance of access from that point. From disability studies, thinking about accessibility for all as human rights, football fans included, was no small thing to realize and implement. And then there's this strange word, communitas. What happens in the stands and why? One way to explain how and why accessibility affects disabled fans' experience of football games is to examine the term communitas. Communitas is when individuals come together and become a group. The group becomes one. This applies, for example, as the color of the team will be dominant, the individual will automatically be part of the team supporters. The group obeys the same unwritten rules, such as when the team scores, all the team supporters celebrate, and when one starts singing or clapping, others will follow. The group eventually works as a one person. The Iceland fans' famous Viking clap, seen on the picture, is a good example. This positive experience of communitas can be an influential factor in giving the individual a sense of belonging to a group in any way, shape, or form. But accessibility can create breaches in this magical experience. And disabled fans, such as myself, can lose important moments in the game, feeling excluded from both game and group. But where are we heading? One of the problems facing the clubs is that every stadium is owned by the municipalities, so the clubs need to get them on board to make the necessary change for better access. I have not personally heard back from every club after turning in the report, so I am not sure what is happening. But most of what I have heard is very positive and promising as the clubs are willing. And I do believe that the combination of my role as a university student and new open leadership at KSI, of academics and the practical assessments of the stadiums, made this work possible. I gained deeper understanding of how groups behave, and I gained vocabulary on human rights aspects, both of which I can share with my fellow DIOs. And I am confident that such understanding will empower us working towards access for all. Thank you.